Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Ask Us Anything webinar, where we are going to be talking about food safety culture and company mindsets today. My name is Amanda Cameron, and I'm a quality and food safety specialist at Perenia, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's webinar. For those of you who are not familiar with Perenia, Perenia supports the growth, transformation, and economic development in Nova Scotia's agriculture, seafood, and food and beverage sectors. Our speakers answering your questions today are going to include Shelley McDonald, who is our co-manager of the Quality and Food Safety Department. She is our lead trainer, and she's very passionate about educating our clients and transferring knowledge to them. She assists clients with navigating food safety regulatory requirements, as well as third-party certifications. Our other speaker is Elaine Grant, who is the other co-manager of the Quality and Food Safety Department. She coaches clients in developing and implementing customized food safety and quality programs, and she helps with their overall process and production efficiencies. She makes her programs approachable and easily maintainable so that the programs can grow easily with you as your operations grow. All right, so Shelley, do you want to start off by explaining what food safety culture is?
Sure. Thanks, Amanda. Hello, everyone, and welcome. So the definition of food safety culture, basically it is shared values, beliefs, and behaviors within an organization that influence how food safety is prioritized and practiced. So one of the things I like to think of is what would you do if nobody else was looking? So for example, if you had a company policy around what happens when food is spilled on the floor, and you're the only one left in the processing room, and you drop that piece of product on the floor, would you look around, pick it up, and continue to process and package it? Remember, there are no exceptions when it comes to food safety. It is a company-wide commitment, and everybody at the facility needs to be on the same page.
Great, thank you for that definition. So now that we know what food safety culture is, I'm going to start off with a couple general questions before jumping into the ones that we received during the webinar registration. So Elaine, what are some challenges that you've experienced in terms of a positive food safety culture and company mindset?
Well, unfortunately, sometimes you have it or you don't. So when you walk into a situation like that as a QA professional or anybody trying to manage a quality and food safety program, unfortunately, you have to work with whatever you got. It doesn't mean that it's, not fixable, and it takes time and energy you have to invest in it, I guess, for sure. There's good and there's positive food safety culture, but when you walk into a negative, it's definitely challenging to work with those personalities, for sure. And I think, Shelley, you said something about you saw something in a webinar or something you watched. Bacteria is the only culture some people have, so that's really challenging. And don't get discouraged if you walk into a situation like that. Look at it as continuous improvement. Try to stay positive yourself, and that positivity will rub off everybody else you're working with.
Exactly. You can change it from being a negative one to a positive, but it will take time and effort. All right. So how does one implement a positive food safety culture?
So implementation starts at the top. That is number one. Senior management is responsible for setting the food safety goals and the objectives. And then, of course, two, those goals and those objectives they set, senior management must also follow those. So they have to set an example. Three is once those objectives are set and established, it needs to be communicated to all staff at the company. So these include all relevant policies and procedures. And when you are going over and communicating these with staff members, you want them to understand the why. So when they understand the why, that is going to allow you to have a more successful and positive food safety culture. Also keep in mind employee involvement and empowerment goes a long way. So have real conversations with your staff. Remember, your staff are the folks that are on the floor. They're handling your product, they're packaging your product, they're storing your product each and every day. So they are going to know best. So always include them and continue to recognize staff when you are seeing good food safety practices. Of course, those that require some mentoring, it is important for you to work with them and give them the support they need. This is not about placing blame. Remember, we are all lifelong learners. And once you have implemented the food safety culture, it doesn't stop there. You need to take the time to monitor it. And you need to take the time to measure it as well.
Great, that was a very descriptive response, and it's kind of a perfect segue into some of the questions that we got from our listeners today. So we received, everyone acts as if food safety is only the quality assurance department's responsibility. How do I respond to this as a QA manager?
Well, I had a manager I used to work with, and she always said, quality is not a department, it's a company-wide commitment. So, you know, just as you want to put good quality product going out the door, you want to have good food safety coming out the door as well. And like most sports or a band, even the solo people playing the sports and playing in band, they have support systems in place because they can't do it by themselves. So you have to change that mindset, and otherwise you're going to just struggle with your food safety implementation. Unfortunately, one person can't do it all, and it's really hard when you're the only person wanting to spark that change, but all it takes is a spark, to be honest. So staying focused and staying on that path of encouraging good food safety culture and accountability across the board, that will eventually, with those key players, it'll get rolling for sure. Yeah, it just takes some time sometimes.
Yes, for sure. It doesn't happen overnight, that's for sure. So how do we measure food safety once they have it? How do they know they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and how do they track that?
So something to keep in mind is use the tools that make sense for your company. Don't put tools in place or measures in place that's not going to work. So some examples that we have seen companies use are as simple as checklists, observations, or food safety culture surveys. When it comes to checklists and observations, these may include things such as management commitment and leadership. So how committed is management to food safety? Are they setting an example when they are out on the processing floor? Are employees following the best practices and policies and procedures that are written and put in place at your facility? What about their engagement in training? Are they empowered to acknowledge when there are food safety risks? How much do they know about food safety hazards and risk management? Are they following that hygiene and GMP policy day in and day out? If you do choose to do surveys, which we do see a lot of clients using surveys, surveys should be anonymous and objective. So you need to be aware of the questions that you are asking. Also, don't just print out these surveys, get your staff to fill them out once a year, and then file them away and do nothing with them. You must take each and every survey, review the results, and then put action plans in place based on the answers on those surveys. So, measuring food safety culture, another thing to keep in mind is that it should be happening on a day-to-day basis, not, oh, our audit's in a month, so let's prepare now and do those measurements. Food safety is something that you want to have in place each and every day at your facility.
And if surveys aren't your thing, or you're too small of a operation, I see a lot of farms do this as well. They have a group of 10 people. They'll have a little tailgate talk if the first of the week before they get into, you know, harvesting, producing, packing kind of thing. And they talk about what went well, you know, from the previous week, you know, what they could improve on, and that sparks that conversation across the board. You can also take a look at your corrective actions. How many corrective actions are you getting? You know, you can measure based on that. How many foreign object complaints are you getting? Consumer complaints? You know, how are your internal audits going? You know, if you have a good positive food safety culture, you may not get 100% on all those things, but you should see a drastic decrease in the amount of issues you come across. So that's what I've seen work. I've even saw a plant, they kind of had the Kaizen Kanban thing going on, and they would do that the first of their shift, the first of the week. And as soon as you walked in the building, it was like you feel the positivity and how everybody wanted to do their best every day. And if something went wrong, they all worked together to find a solution. So, you know, it really makes a difference, and it really helps, you know, foster that food safety culture by keeping it at the forefront every week.
Great. Yeah. So it's not a one size fit all. Like you have to choose what works best for you. So the next question that was asked was, if you notice a food safety risk during a batch run, what would you do and who would you tell?
Well, I'll tell you right now, that's a question you should be asking employees and management. You know, hoping that everybody asks that question, you know, or answers that question the correct way. Well, if you see an issue, you're going to tell somebody. Who are they going to tell? Do they know who to tell? Are they scared to speak up? These are all things that you could have during these conversations. You know, when you're having your toolbox talks or your weekly 15-minute pre-start meetings, you know, with everybody to kind of get them pumped up for the week. That's what you should be talking to them about. And it's a good way to measure your training effectiveness if they can answer correctly and answer really quick.
This should be something that is set in the orientation training. One of the first things they should know is when you see something that puts food safety at risk, this is who you go to. This is our policy for reporting it. And that way, everybody feels like they can go to their supervisor or their manager each and every time.
I'll put an add on to that. Your supervisors and managers should know what to do if something gets, you know, they should encourage, thank you for telling me, letting us know. This is what we're going to do to address this. This is who else we need to bring in on this, depending on the situation. You know, sometimes people tell managers and supervisors and they just don't know what to do, or, you know, they got the production frame in mind where they want to just get the product at the door. You know, make sure you're talking to everybody, not just the employees on the floor. It's a full team effort for sure.
Yeah, there's that expression, when you see something, say something. So you got to make sure you're telling the right person. And yeah, supervisors are normally a safe bet. And then they'll pass it on to whoever else needs to know. So, how do you make time to implement and measure the food safety culture at your facility?
Well, if you if you either do the time, you know, encouraging food safety culture and working on it, or you can spend that time fixing a whole bunch of, you know, issues that are going on and writing incident reports over and over again. So I think you just kind of have to make the time. And like I said, 15 minutes is a huge step to start, you know, and it sets everybody off on the right foot. Like you just have to make the time. And then, like Shelley said with the surveys, if you're going to do surveys on a regular basis or whatever metrics you're using, make sure you're looking at those at least monthly to kind of measure your progress. Don't look at it a month before the audit, because that's not going to tell you anything, you know. Then you have no time to react or pivot. It's more likely pivot than react. To pivot to correct things before, you know, you kind of take a backward slide when you're trying to implement food safety culture.
Think of it like this too. This should be proactive as opposed to reactive. So by instilling positive food safety right from the get-go, it's going to make your job a lot easier as opposed to having to backpedal. Like Amanda said earlier, yes, you can always change food safety culture, but it is definitely easier when you are instilling those correct policies and procedures and monitoring and ensuring people are doing everything they're supposed to do on a day-to-day basis.
For sure. And you can notice that with companies when you're first going in and you're implementing something, and then anybody there's some resistance, but then later on, any new employee that's hired, that's just the way it is when they arrive. So those new employees don't even know the old system or the old like mindset of how things used to be. So it's easier once you have something implemented for it to be followed.
It's also easier for it to go sideways too, right? If you don't correct it before you bring the new people in, because they're like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, and then they just
Yeah.
kind of go along with it, right? So
Yeah,
you got to act kind of now and right from the start, you know.
yeah, we don't want to be teaching bad habits. Okay, so the next question was, I recently took over my family business and I'm having a hard time instilling positive food safety culture due to long-term staff and an old mindset. We've been doing it this way for years and we never made anyone sick. Is kind of where they're coming from.
Yes. So this is the old mindset of if it isn't broken, it doesn't need to be fixed. And again, this is reactive versus being proactive, right? So if you're being proactive and you are mentoring and supporting those that require assistance and acknowledging when things aren't being done correctly, then you're able to change it. So some reasons that we see resistance is people, not everybody's open to change. But in today's world, everything is changing all of the time. Another reason is zero employee empowerment or the lack of clear communication. So you've set the goals and the objectives, but you haven't clearly communicated them to everybody at the business, or that lack of recognition or reward. So some people are like, why do I need to reward them? I pay them for the job that they're doing. Sometimes, just giving somebody a pat on the back goes a long way. It's going to be an uphill battle, especially if you are working with those who have been with the company for 10, 20 years and they're used to doing things the old way. And now all of a sudden, you've developed and you've had to implement new quality and food safety management systems at your facility to meet certain certifications that you haven't had to meet in the past. So communicate why the change is required, why it is important to make these changes, and what it means for them. So we have a new certification. Our customers are requesting this of us. What does this mean for the business versus the employees? If we have this new certification, we have new market access, we have more revenue, we can provide more jobs. If we don't follow these things, then, people could lose their jobs. We're not going to have people wanting to buy our product over and over again. So you're paving the way for the future, for your kids, for your grandkids. Remember, changes are going to happen. And basically, we need to learn to embrace them. We might not like them, but we do need to learn to work with change.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat and it was pertaining to a question or two ago. So I know that the internal escalation would be customizable, but when it escalates past the company measures, would you have recommendations for an external escalation list, such as recalls? So I'm thinking we would just refer them to the CFIA recalls for that one, for the requirements.
Yeah, I mean, CFA has a recall, like what happens if there's a recall kind of thing. I think there's a question above that too. It says, does Perennia have a sample escalation list that can be
That's
used
what
when
I
there's
think she
an...
means in terms of the escalation for
Oh,
the
okay.
external.
Seen the batch run issue question. Hmm.
I'll
Yeah,
send the CFIA links for what to do
yeah,
in the event of a recall and who they would have to contact their Atlantic region if they're in the Atlantic region, but
yeah. There's a number you can call and that kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah, so that would just be added to your program, who you would contact there. All right. So another question was, I'm afraid to hold employees accountable due to employee retention. How does one deal with this?
So it is possible to positively hold employees accountable without losing employees or the fear of losing employees when you do have those clear food safety goals and objectives established and implemented, but you've communicated the why to staff. Most people want to do a good job. We don't purposely go into work and say, hey, what can I do that's going to upset my supervisor or my manager today? Most of us take pride in the jobs that we do. However, if we are not providing regular and constructive feedback, how does one know whether or not they're doing a good job? So unless you are letting them know if they're meeting those food safety expectations, they will never know. So this is where that accountability is important. When people do a good job, it can be as simple as, hey, Elaine, you did a great job today. Thank you for letting us know that you saw a rodent running through the facility or whatever the nonconformance may be. Um, and then, of course, you have to hold them responsible when there is negative as well. And that is as simple as mentoring somebody, giving them the support they need. Do they require retraining? Do you need to sit down and explain that why to them? Make sure it does not become a blame game. If it becomes a blame game, nobody's going to want to stay anyways. Another thing to keep in mind is prioritize your employees. Get to know them. When you're out on the floor, say, hey, Amanda, how was your weekend today? Or how are your children doing? School's almost over. Do you have any plans for vacation with them? Just having a organic, meaningful conversation and providing any training opportunities for them, learning opportunities, work-life balances, competitive wages and benefits. Remember, if you take care of your employees, they're going to take care of you.
Yeah, you won't have problem with the positive food safety culture. You won't have any, if you have a positive food safety culture, you won't have trouble holding on to employees from my experience. For the most part, unless some sort of life-changing thing happens or whatever, invest in them personally, invest in them professionally as well. If you're a QA person and you manage the program behind the desk, you never go on the floor, you're not invested in food safety culture. You're not invested in the facility and what you produced. You won't possibly know what's going on in production. And when there's a panic situation or something happens on the floor, they need somebody with a clear head that can help them problem solve. You need those employees to be able to open up to you, be able to figure that out and fix it. So if you don't have that communication already, that foundation of communication across the board, it's, everything becomes impossible and everything, feels like running uphill. Yeah.
It's also really obvious too, to anyone coming in to know whether or not you are spending that time out on the floor. So for example, I was visiting a business and we went down on the floor and all of a sudden a cooler was turned off. And I looked at the QA manager and I said, oh, so how long has the cooler been turned off? And she looked at me and had to go to the supervisor to ask the supervisor how long the cooler was turned off. That right there showed me that QA person hadn't been down on the floor since that time that the cooler was turned off. And it had been turned off for quite some time. So it's really obvious whether or not you are on the floor.
I think if you go out on the floor too as a quality professional or any supervisor for that matter, regardless, and they say, oh, long time no see. That's your first clue that you need to be out. I used to go out when I worked in manufacturing. I would go every morning and see how things were producing, touch base with the employees and just, meet that connection. If you're new to QA at that facility, that's what you need to do because you got to get to know these people, right? And get to know the process. That's how you learn, is like physically go out and see what these folks are doing. and it shows respect, right? And then they're more likely to listen to you when you have things that you want to implement as well. It's like a two-way street here.
Yes, building those relationships. It's only possible if you're physically not there. So, all right. I think you already kind of touched on this one, Shelley, a little bit, but it said, how do we celebrate and praise our staff when they do the right thing, even if it wasn't the easiest thing to do? How could we recognize staff on a shoestring budget?
So there's many different ways that you can reward staff and celebrate staff. It can include gift cards, time off, small tokens, highlighting successes, or incentives. I know at a company where I worked in the past, when I worked for industry, if we were successful with our recertification of the SQF or any Global Food Safety Initiative certification, the owners always said, go out and take your entire family, get yourself some supper, bring us in the receipt, and we'll take care of it for you. Now, not every company can do that, and I understand that. So, you don't always have to be offering money or time off or things like that. There's a few other things you can do. As simple as a handwritten card. Write a little message in there about how appreciative you are for them doing their job, and acknowledge what they are doing that's positive. Another thing you can do is monthly or quarterly food safety champion certificates. I don't know about you folks, but I love a little healthy competition. So if you know that, your name's going to be blasted on that wall for employee of the month in terms of food safety, isn't that like a little fun game, and it's going to give you a little fire to want to do better than that next person? I'm sure that everybody can enjoy a little friendly competition. And then another thing is, I don't know if you are all familiar with the gotcha game, but empower employees to acknowledge other employees when they're doing a good job. So I see that Elaine's doing something well, and I say, gotcha, Elaine did this really, really well, or Elaine mentored so-and-so today. Something as simple as that goes a long way.
Never turn down a coffee break for sure. Even if you all sit down and somebody brings in donuts or some baked goods or whatever, or coffee, or, it doesn't have to be a massive barbecue, which takes up a lot of time. Like, people just appreciate, what, we got through the audit, because audits are stressful, inspections are stressful, and some places go through a lot of them. So maybe you can't afford that many coffee breaks. So all these suppliers audit poor people have to go through. But you know what? Even if you just do it once a year, it's huge. Like, or a couple times a year. This season, or a really busy season, like a lot of our clients go through seasonal work, right? It's like summer's super busy, harvest season's crazy. It could be, processing crab or whatever in the spring or winter time. Yeah, just any kind of celebration to acknowledge, or even if you do it every day, go out and say, hey, you know what? I really appreciate you doing this. It's like, I mean it. It becomes natural and it doesn't seem forced. But if you just say a thank you once a year, everybody's like, oh yeah, here we go. Here's another staff barbecue kind of thing, right? So, create it, do it regularly, be honest, and be really appreciative of your folks that are helping you along the way. And that helps foster that, you know.
Good answers. Okay. Again, this one's similar, but still different, would be, how does one instill a positive food safety culture when faced with employee resistance and negativity?
Oh, I'll take that one. You'd have to go in with a positive mindset yourself, which is really hard, especially if you're walking into a more of a negative type of workplace. Being positive, supportive, I think, if you go into something like that, sometimes it'll diffuse the negative a little bit. Yeah, I think if you just transparent and really, well, everybody should start their day off positive. Like, there's so much negativity in the world. Like, everybody needs a little kindness and understanding, started out going, okay, this is going to be a good week. these are the key things we want to achieve. I still stand by those tailgate talks, those 15-minute sessions at the time clock before you walk into production and produce food for your families and your friends and your neighbors and your kids. Like, go in there with a positive, yes, we're going to do it. We're going to nail it. We're going to be really good and follow all the policies every day. If you start out positive, I guess it gives you positive energy moving forward and kind of diffuses that negativity.
Also try to make it fun if you can, and relevant as well. So if there's ever like anything that is relevant to your industry, your commodity, say it's a recall or what have you, share that with staff so they see, you know what, it does happen. How can we prevent it from happening? By ensuring everybody's following the policies and the procedures each and every day.
Great, thanks. The next one was, does food safety culture have to be a formal process? As in like a written process, I'm guessing.
Well, I guess if you're third party audited or GFSI, yes. And that's the challenging part, right? To write down what you want to do. And then taking the time to document all that. It is a good idea to kind of, even if you're not on the third party kind of train yet, it's a good idea to start writing down those metrics, and how you're going to measure it and talk about it. Because when you get to that point, because everybody tends to get to some point where their business grows, and they're going to need to write down a plan for food safety culture to make it that much easier, I guess. So you can't measure what you can't see. So it's good to mark all that down.
Yeah, with the marking it down and the checklist, like Elaine said, the formal process, it keeps you on track. It reminds you of the things you should be looking for, like we mentioned earlier. Is there senior management leadership and commitment? How are they showing it? Are you following the hygiene policy and the sanitation program? Are you taking the time that you need? So it's basically like the little yellow brick road, ensuring that, you know, all of these components of food safety are being met.
Great. Should I share the internal audit results with senior management?
Always. That goes back to the transparency. I mean, you really, to get that company-wide commitment and not be in a silo as QA, it's really important to share those deficiencies because you can't solve all those on your own. That's for sure, right? Like, I don't know what you guys have seen, but I mean, anybody who tries to keep all that into a quiet little pile in their little corner, you're just going to keep writing deviations upon deviations.
No, and again, if you're not sharing that information and all of a sudden you have to make a change to your written program and then you're not communicating it, well, staff's going to keep following what they were previously taught or what they were shown. So they're not going to know that there was a nonconformance, and based on that nonconformance, to prevent recurrence, we have to change the policy or the procedure or do a retraining session or so on.
No, definitely. I agree with both of your inputs on that one. I'm just checking the chat. There's no other questions that have come in on the chat. But so I guess I can ask you guys a few questions that I'm curious about. Can you guys provide an example when you experienced a positive food safety culture?
I'll go first, if you don't mind, Elaine.
Sure.
So during an on-site at a business, the owner was giving a tour of the facility. And as the visitors were getting ready, one of the employees came out through and noticed that some of the visitors were wearing jewelry. And instead of not saying anything, like Amanda said, you see something, you say something, the employee confidently explained to the visitors the hygiene policy and the risks associated with the visitors wearing their jewelry while entering the processing area. So with that being said, they didn't just tell them what the procedure or the policy was. They explained the why. What are the risks associated with this particular or potential hazard? And with that being said, all the visitors removed their jewelry and they were appreciative of the employee because one, they didn't know the rules. The owner didn't provide them with that. And then it just showed how knowledgeable the staff were of their policies at the facility.
Yeah, those are your point people that are touching, the food, that are producing the food. And, if anybody has to be strong in this, it has to be them, right? Because they're working in this day in, day out. I guess for me, I've experienced both. Um, but I've also seen negative turn into positive, and it's been kind of, I don't want to say magical, but it was kind of magical, to be honest. Because it was just, you walk into a place and it's like, oh, this is so sad. Like, these are good people. So, as a specialist, we go in there and we're nudging them along and coaching them through it. And I find when I experience that walking into a negative culture, I make it, more of an effort to talk to those people on the floor and get them opening up. But I do it in front of the person I'm mentoring or coaching. And then they see, oh, all I have to do is talk to these people. So we just kind of get in the rhythm of going out. Every time I come on site, we go through and talk to folks and see what's going on. The first thing we do is get out on the floor, especially if it's somebody I'm mentoring that doesn't normally go on the floor a whole lot. That's the first thing I do. We drag through that, and then we come back and do some paperwork. So with me, for positive culture, the gotcha thing was a huge thing in my first place I ever was employed at. For 900 people at that factory, we felt like a close-knit family. It was crazy. So we all got together. They celebrated as much as they possibly could for 900 folks. I mean, we did barbecues, we did little awards, we did departments, nominate another department that you see doing really good, and it really, I don't know, it fostered that positivity, and you wanted to come to work every day. Like, if you were sick, you kind of felt bad because you wanted to go to work. I mean, if you have that feeling, or your employees have that feeling and feel appreciated, then you're going to be one of the place for everybody to go work at, for sure. Yeah.
Great.
That brought up a good point, Elaine. I remember one of the companies I was at as well. They would acknowledge birthdays. Now, I'm not saying you have to acknowledge everybody's birthday at the facility. And, it was a company that was large, but not too large. So on that particular person's birthday, they would purchase them a cake, and a cake that they enjoyed. They got to know the employee. And if it was a carrot cake that Elaine loved, then for Elaine's birthday, she would get a carrot cake. And if Amanda liked cheesecake, then Amanda ended up getting cheesecake. And everybody thought, like, wow, they know me. They know my birthday. They know what kind of cake I like. So I'm not saying you have to go out and buy your employees cake or anything like that. It could even be just a birthday card to say, hey, happy birthday. Just like it can be a thank you card when you see that they're doing a good job, or these cards can also be the gotcha. Saw you doing this, good. Keep up the great work.
Wow, those are great examples. Something that we haven't really discussed would be the negative side of it, or the consequences of having a negative food safety culture. So what can happen if you have a bad food safety culture at your facility?
So we talked about how food safety culture is all about setting food safety objectives, goals, and expectations. Those written procedures and those policies. So just imagine if the employees are not following those policies, those procedures, they are negative. Senior management's not following those. Now all of a sudden you have a more likelihood of having a biological hazard or a chemical hazard or a physical hazard at your facility, meaning that this could lead to a potential foodborne illness, or absolute worst case scenario, a fatality. None of us want that, right? If that happens at our facility, that's going to ruin our brand, our reputation, It may lead to closure, which means if the company closes, the employees lose their job. And nobody wants to lose their job. Another thing to keep in mind is if you have those third-party certifications that we were talking about, SQF, Canada GAP, BRCGS, then you're at stake of potentially losing that certification, that recertification, as well as if you're under regulatory, so CFIA or the FDA, you could lose your license. So that is absolutely worst case scenario in terms of negative food safety culture. Another thing to keep in mind is we only know what we're taught and what we learn. So if we see people doing their best and following the policies and procedures every single day, we are also going to follow that. Negativity breeds negativity. So if you can go in there, be as positive as possible, never blame when you do see something, that's not right. You work with them, give them the support, retraining, maybe it's hands-on, maybe it's a simple conversation. That's going to go a long way. And you will be more successful in the long run.
I'll add that too. Maybe we should talk about training just a little bit on that, Shelley, now that you brought that up. It kind of sparked something. If you're finding you're having constant deviations and doing the retraining part, and this, I guess, goes hand in hand with food safety culture. If you're constantly retraining and people aren't getting it, maybe you should kind of reevaluate how you're training. Are you just making them read an SOP? Maybe there's somebody that can't learn by reading. You have to be really flexible of how some people learn by doing, and not everybody will advocate for themselves either. And you may not clue in because you're busy and you just got to get this done. You want to check that box. You need to take a giant step back and say, okay, you know what? How do you learn best? Are you understanding what I'm getting? Go out and do that the verification of effectiveness. Otherwise, you're going to run into a lot of deviations and a lot of repeat stuff. And it may be just as simple as whatever you're doing is not effective, or how you're communicating is not effective. Right?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
There is another question in the chat that kind of piggybacks on what we were just talking about. So they said, do you have an estimate of the cost range for deviations? Or is that too vague, and maybe the biggest cost you've seen that's come from a negative food safety culture?
Loss of business.
Yeah,
Look at that
lots
big
of
recall in the States. Those people went to jail, like that peanut cork that they hid their lab results. Like, that's a negative food safety culture.
Mhm.
You could totally be out of business. You could, have, CFA could come shut you down.
Lawsuits.
Lawsuits, or you could have, if you have a negative food safety culture, maybe your staff changeover is crazy. So then you have to keep retraining people and hiring people, and then kind of the word gets out that nobody wants to work there. That's that could happen too. I've seen that happen. People that you can't get anybody to work for them. What kind of culture do you have? Are you encouraging positive food safety culture?
That's a good point, Elaine. Not many people realize that as somebody working with food, it is everyone's role and responsibility to produce a safe, sanitary product every single time. So that example you just gave us, the QA knowingly hid the results. She presented the results to the owner. The owner said, no, you're going to change the results. I pay you. She changed the results. And not only did the owner go to jail, but the QA manager did as well. So if you knowingly, no matter if you're sanitation, maintenance, production, a QA technician, a QC technician, a QA manager, it's not just the owner that's going to be held accountable if somebody ends up dying because of your product.
So I guess that's the ultimate price, really. I mean, it could be, get a bunch of complaints and CFA gets called, and then you have to destroy a bunch of product. It depends on the cost of your product and your time to produce it, right? And then there's the whole reputation. I mean, mistakes do happen, and I guess this kind of creeps into like how to manage a recall thing, but be transparent, especially if you have a social media presence. Get out there and say, you know what, this happened. This is what we're doing to fix it. appreciate your support. If contact this number if there's issues, or if you want to do a return, we'll honor everything. Being open, transparent, and positive going into it. Any kind of situation or emergency situation like that, you have to do that, or else it's going to totally backfire. So, yeah.
Thank you both for those answers. I'm gonna transition into showing you guys some resources that might be useful and that discuss food safety culture. So I'll share my screen again. Share. All right. So there's this paper called A Culture of Food Safety, a position paper from the Global Food Safety Initiative. That's a great resource. It details 5 dimensions and critical components of food safety culture. So that's vision and mission, people, consistency, adaptability, hazards, and risk awareness. So I'll pop that into chat shortly and you guys can download it. Then another really helpful resource is this website called the Alliance to Stop Foodborne Illness.org, and they have a food safety culture toolkit that's available for you just to explore on the website. And you can see they have a bunch of different resources available. So podcasts, videos, books, articles, whatever you're interested in to learn more about food safety culture. And then they also have this gamification section where they give you food safety games and there's things you can download, some puzzles, a food safety escape room, lots of little fun activities that you could use at your facility to instill some positive food safety culture.
And if you want to just bounce off any ideas when you're kind of implementing your food safety culture, any part of your quality and food safety program, to be honest, we offer free technical advice for Nova Scotia-based food and beverage companies. So, if you're running into a snag and you need help figuring out a root cause analysis to, respond to a deviation or nonconformity, or you're just not sure where to start, or want somebody to double check to see if you're on the right path, just reach out and kind of give us a call or an email, and we'll try and help you as best we can. And we also have for fee quality and food safety services as well. So if you need a needs assessment or to get funding for equipment, or a gap or pre-audit assessment to any standard or regulatory requirement. We do coaching as well. We help with development and implementation of any HACCP-based quality and food safety systems. And we do internal auditing, as we're all certified food safety and quality auditors.
So the quality and food safety team at Perennia also offer lots of different training. We have in-person training. So you can come and it's very interactive and there's lots of workshops being done and those types of training. We also offer virtual learning sessions where you can take the training from your workplace or from the comfort of your home. We also offer e-learning sessions, our food safety fundamentals, and as well as any customized in-person sessions. So if there's, a particular topic that you're having a hard time with, or like implementing at your facility, you can bring in an outsider, let's say, because your employees are so used to hearing you say the same thing over and over and over again that when you bring in somebody new to the company and they hear it from a different set of lips, it's like, oh, maybe so and so is not making up these rules. Some employees, believe that it's the QA making these things up, that it's not due to certifications or regulatory requirements. So lots of different training options out there. You can visit the website and you will see all the different options, as well as our free Ask Us Anything and any free webinars that we offer. So some of the training you have to pay for and some of them are for free. And then we also have lots of different funding opportunities available right now. You can learn more about these funding opportunities by going to perennia.ca and clicking on the programs. So we have the local supplier food safety support program. We have the small scale food and beverage processing equipment program, the Food Ventures program, as well as the Nova Scotia Beef Abattoir and Processing Assistance program. So lots of different funding opportunities available to you, and they do all differ. So it's important for you to read the guidelines and see whether or not it makes sense for you to apply for that particular funding opportunity.
And I'll mention too, Shelley, that some of these funding opportunities will help you pay for training that you may be required or you want to take. So please take advantage of that as well.
Yeah, like we have the option to fully cover HACCP training and HACCP refresher. So you might want to look into that if that's something of interest or a requirement.
Great. There's still a few more minutes, so I'll just ask you guys one final thing. What is one thing you want the listeners of today to take away about food safety culture?
Myself, I want folks to realize that although it may be a struggle because you are in a small business working with, your parents owned it and the parents before that owned it, and this, some of these employees have been with us for 30 years and they're used to the way mom did it or granddad did it. You can always change the food safety culture. Is it going to be easy? Absolutely not. Remember the why. Explain the why you are doing things. Get them involved. They are the ones that are going to know best. So make them feel empowered and always give the kudos, guys. But you can change it. That's what I want you to take away from today's session is it's not going to be easy, but it can be done.
And if you run into any kind of issue and you're trying really hard and something's just missing the mark, reach out and take advantage of that free technical assistance. We've been there, we've seen a lot of things. I've seen it shift. I've seen a negative culture shift. It doesn't happen overnight. But you got to try and you got to start somewheres. And, it's really creates a healthy environment and you'll notice a difference in your quality and food safety. It'll increase quite a bit. Yeah. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Thank you guys both so much for answering all of our questions today and for all of our listeners that came in today. This is a recorded session, so we will be sending out the link afterward with the recording as well. It'll be on our YouTube channel. If you have any further questions, you can contact us at foodsafety@perennia.ca. And yes, thank you, everybody.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.